Good morning, everybody. It is Mindset Monday, and it is May 11th, and I can't believe we're already almost halfway through May. But May is such a great month. It's that mindset of knowing that we are going into a selling season. I'm located here in Colorado, and I live in the mountains, and that's when all the snow has dried up, and we are looking at getting houses on the market and getting ready, like I said, for that selling season to come. Now, today, I'm excited about this topic because I'd say about 10 years ago, I discovered John Assaraf. And John Assaraf, he was on that movie, The Secret. He had a book called The Answer. I love that book. It's Creating Financial Freedom. And everything about that book, to me, is based on your mindset. You know, how can you work with your programming that you've had in your brain for so many years, and how you can switch that to something that is more positive and help you with your goals. And so he created, John Asraf, he created what's called Neuro-Gym. And Neuro-Gym is you can look it up. I'll have some information at the end to share with you. But I went ahead and joined Neurogym, and like I said, about 10 years ago. And what it is it helps you to um, do exercises, and he calls them exercises. So exercises inside your brain to help you with you know, exercising those core muscles of your brain. So let me share the PowerPoint because that way you'll see what I'm talking about. And let me get it from the slideshow. And oops, this is the last slide. So let's go to the beginning. So there's 7 core neuromuscles in your brain. And your brain system supports your focus, all of your emotions, your habits, um, everything that how you adapt, and also your decision making. So, like I said, this is a neuro gym, and it's based on the assessment that he created, John Asraf. That's how you spell his name. And he actually is a realtor. And what's really cool about him is he created the vision board, and this was a long time ago when, before the vision board got started. But he was the one that said, to have your goals so that you can actually see them and visualize. And so the first core muscle is based on decision making and critical thinking, and the ability that you have in your brain to process information. And we talk about this with your reticular activating system. If you've ever heard of that, that's part of your brain that helps you to also focus. And so this, first part of your core muscles in your brain is the ability to process information and look at risks. And then you can make decisions based on your clarity and your confidence. The second core muscle is based on your emotional regulation and your resilience. And so we talk about resilience a lot as being realtors. How resilient are you, when you've have a lot of things happen, like right now, we're going through a market that's changing. It's been changing over the last 2 to 3 years. And so that part of your brain that actually looks at how do you stay grounded? How do you adapt to the changing of things that are happening, and that resilient through any kind of pressure or uncertainty? And then you've got the other number 3 of your core muscles are your belief systems. And so if you think about that aspect, you really do have to have self-worth. Um, and so if you're not doing mental exercises or exercises like John Assaraf says, you know, you can lose identity, you can lose confidence. So there, that part of your brain that has your belief systems and your self-worth is really important, and it shapes, you know, everything about your self-image and also your personal growth. The fourth core muscle is on motivation and habits. We talk about habits a lot in Mindset Monday, and these are the systems that are going to drive all of that discipline that you have. You know, how to take action and forming routines, and that way you can have long-term success. And so you've probably heard of this before, but you know, you have mindset, then you have skill set, then you take action, and then you will get results. And that's how success is made. The fifth core muscle is the adaptability and also your cognitive flexibility. So what this part again talks about, you know, that resilience aspect again, the ability to shift your perspective. And so when, you know, a lot of times we are in situations where we feel like we're stuck, and this part of your brain will help you so that you can learn something different, get out of that stuck mode, and start adjusting and changing your actual environment. And so a lot of times we talk about, you know, that neuroplasticity part of your brain, and this is what really is so important is to look at how can you change your adaptability, how you can start working more effectively because things are changing every day, right? And especially in our industry, we are seeing so many changes, and then some people get, you know, fear around this. So how can you shift that perspective? How can you shift that part of your brain so that you can actually look at learning and adjusting so that you can actually change your environment? And the sixth core muscle is based on creativity and innovation. So I love this aspect, and I love talking about how when you feel like there's nothing that you can do, you can actually close your eyes and visualize how to create. And when you're creating new ideas and generating new ideas in your brain, you're connecting, right? All of a sudden, you have these concepts of things that you can actually change. And then you start thinking beyond those limitations that you put on yourself. So this part, like I said, all of these core muscles are really important in your brain, but I love this aspect of being creative and starting to innovate how you look at things. And with working with all of these core muscles, there's one part of your brain that manages stress. And I know that a lot of people are going through stress right now. I talk to a lot of agents, and you know this aspect of part of what you need to do to maintain clarity and to maintain your composure, and then you have this intentional decision making even when you are under pressure, because so many times we get caught up. You know, I've done it before. We stress over this certain thing and it just keeps popping into your brain. And so what happens is what we're going to talk about next is how to do that, how to manage that stress so that your brain is, because it's programmed, right? And every time you do something when you're under stress, it's going to happen over and over and over again because you haven't learned how to make decisions under pressure without having too much stress involved in it. So we're going to ask you, you know, I'm going to give you a copy of the link of the assessment so that you can take that assessment yourself. And I took it yesterday, and I was really surprised to see, based on these seven core muscles, what percentage I was. You know, you think you're going to have this high percentage because you're like, oh, I know myself and I can handle stress. But I actually didn't score very well on some of the core muscles. So I'm going to be looking at the plan of how I can score higher on this assessment test. So we know that strong minds are built. Okay, so you're born and then you gather all this information for years and years. You gather all this information and then your brain becomes programmed with a lot of the things based on what happened to you. So if you had a lot of drama, then a lot of times it's going to take a little bit more work with the things because, again, your brain has been programmed. And so I want you to know that you can actually train those neuromuscles. You can train them so that you can have more clarity, more confidence. And reminder for me that I will link this in the chat at the last slide um, so that you can understand this assessment yourself. So a lot of times, we put goals on ourselves, and I want you to know that it's great to have goals. It is, a lot of times we look at the beginning of the year and we say, we're going to have these goals and this is what we're going to do. And then if you can look at like your business plan and look at I have a tracker that I monitor and I look at that tracker. I look at that tracker pretty much every day to see where I am so that I can reach that goal by the end of the year. But, a lot of people don't believe in success and they just think that, I'm just going to set these bigger goals every year. But what happens is a lot of times the goals will just live in that conscious part of your mind. And people don't realize that there's a non-conscious or a subconscious part of your brain that you also need to look at because 95% of your behavior does not follow the conscious part of your brain. So I don't know if you've heard this before, but as little as 2% of us follow our non-conscious. And we really need to think about it. So if 95% of it is based on that non-conscious part, and then you've got that conscious part. And what I mean by conscious is, let's just say, you learn to walk, and after you learn to walk, it becomes non-conscious, right? You don't have to say, okay, I'm going to put one leg in front of the other. It just becomes non-conscious. And the same thing like with riding a bike. Once you learn how to ride a bike, you get on the bike and you become non-conscious. You just pedal and you just know how to. And believe it or not, we drive in our cars a lot of times in that non-conscious part of our brain. Have you ever like been on the phone and all of a sudden you reach your destination and you're like, oh my gosh, how did I reach my destination? You literally drove when you're with your non-conscious part of your brain. So when you think about our brain and how those 7 core muscles that I talked about, your brain really does run on patterns of things that you have learned, your habits, the emotional reaction to things that you've had. Like I said, if you've had a lot of uh, trauma or drama in your life, it sticks in your brain, and it can sometimes you can lose focus because you're listening or your non-conscious part of your brain that's been programmed to think certain things. So these are largely automated and they're reinforced through conditioning. So that's what I'm talking about with that conditioning aspect of it. How can you start conditioning your brain and conditioning your emotional responses differently? So that conditioning shapes your performance. So if you have a conditioned hesitation, because a lot of times people do, they hesitate and then they end up not doing something because that condition that's part of who you are. If you hesitate, then you're always going to be in that conditioned hesitation. If you have stress and it's a conditioned type of stress, then you're always going to feel that again over and over. So what we're going to try to do is how do we change that condition, that condition procrastination, when things start feeling uncomfortable, your brain will automatically, based on that condition that you've done to yourself, procrastination through so many years, whenever something feels uncomfortable, you're gonna that procrastination is gonna happen and you're gonna default right there. So how can we change that? And then there's part of what we call the avoidance loop. If you decide to start an important project and then you feel, really excited about this project, you're going to do this, and then what happens is you end up, opening your laptop and you get distracted. And I know I'm the same as a lot of people. That distraction happens. You start reading emails, you start scrolling on your phone. Oh my gosh, I've done that so many times and I catch myself, right? And then all of a sudden you organize something that's not important at all, and you get, like I said, distracted, right? You're in that situation where, what was I talking about? What was I going to do that was so important? And so I always take notes when something comes into my head and I know that it's very important. I write it down because that distraction can happen so much in our business. And what John Assaraf says, it's not really laziness. It's just this condition. It's this condition loop that you've been putting yourself in, and you end up not being able to get out of it. Okay, so it looks like oops, sorry. There we go. My screen was stuck. So let's talk about willpower, right? Again, most people, we try to base our, motivation on willpower. And what happens is that conditioning can overpower that, the way our brain's been conditioned or patterned, it can overpower your willpower or even your motivation. So if we have lasting performance and you start training these mental parts of your brain and those emotional systems, all of a sudden that pattern that you had, you can have a new default. You can actually rewire that condition that you've had for so many years, and you can start with a totally new default. And so when you retrain those neuromuscles, we start to understand that conditioning is not going to be that destiny for you. If you understand that you can train these neuromuscles, and what John Assaraf says means they can be retrained because they've already been trained a certain way. And I know you know what I'm talking about. If you have that part that's been so programmed, and this pattern has been so programmed that you end up doing the same thing over and over and over again. And that's what, a lot of times people say, if you do something over and over and you're getting the same results, that's like insanity. So we want to understand that, yes, we can change. We can change to build stronger focus, to have different emotional responses, to have more resilience, and our decision making becomes easier. So they're not like talking yourself out of things. And then that adaptability. So as soon as we start to adapt to this new default that we have, we'll have more creativity and we'll be able to really manage stress so much better. So believe me, it has taken me years and years and years to get to this point where I feel that I can trust myself. I have clarity when I make decisions. And if stress ever happens, I know that I can go back to this aspect of my brain and reprogram the way I'm thinking, because so many people live in stress. They live in stress every single day. And I just don't want that to happen for you, because you can change your thoughts. And I'm a Louise Hay instructor, and Louise Hay talked about this, and you can look her up. The book You Can Heal Your Life is based on those emotions that you have and how you make decisions. And so many times we think a thought, and I want you to know that thoughts are real. They really are. They're real for a second. And since they are real, they can be changed. Okay, so it's just a matter of doing it, taking the action to change. So once you start training your default response, which means instead of going after what's been conditioned and what's been programmed, you notice it. Okay, it pops up and you're like, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to have that fear. I'm going to stay centered. I'm going to take a big breath and I'm going to look at how I can change this thought so that I can be better clarity and better confidence. And then all of a sudden you can focus. All right. And that reticular activating system that I was talking about in part of your brain, this is where affirmations can happen, where you can literally change your thoughts so that you can have better emotional regulation. And then all of a sudden your decisions are clear. And so once your default responses change, it's not because you forced it, right? You don't want to ever force anything when it comes to emotions or regulating your decision making. You just want to start training it, training your brain to see possibilities versus being stuck. So here is the assessment. I really want you guys to look at it. Um, it talks about, most people never see how their brain is actually wired. And your brain, we call it the subconscious part of your brain. I call it non-conscious because, like I said, it's that part that you're not conscious of that's constantly working. And it's wired and it totally, all those synapses and all that neuroplasticity aspect of your brain, it determines how you handle your stress, how you look at decisions, your confidence, fear. And I want you to remember this acronym when you think of fear. If something pops up and you are um, fearful of it, it's false evidence appearing real. Write that down. Fear is false evidence appearing real. So, yes, if you are confronting a bear, we have up here in the mountains where I live, bears just walk through my yard. We have moose, we have mountain lions, we have a lot of these really scary things. But if you have that fearful energy, a lot of times that animal can feel that fear. So this is where, again, you can train your brain to get rid of the fear and focus on confidence. And a lot of times they tell you, in bear safety, I've gone to a lot of these classes up here in the mountains where, if you make yourself really big and you yell and, that part of it courses through your body and then you radiate that you're not fearful. And so a lot of times the animal will just actually run away. So what I'm saying with that false evidence appearing real is the thought. The thought is not really real. You have created it, and there's ways to let it go. There's ways to let fear go and just focus. And then again, how you automatically behave 95% of the time is based on your non-conscious. Okay. So only 5% is conscious. So when you think about it like that, you're like, okay, my brain runs and does things without me consciously thinking about it. So how can I start working with that other 95%. So if you want to change your results, the first step in understanding that underlying hidden pattern is how it drives your behavior. So it's so important to understand how you are driving your own behavior. Okay, so you can take this assessment. What I can do is actually see if I can cut and paste it, and I'll put it in the, oops, went away. I don't know if I can cut and paste this. Here we go. So this is it. I'll cut it here and then go back to presentation and put it in the view. So I'll stop sharing. All right. So hold on here. Okay. So I put it in the chat for you. That's the assessment. And really take the time. It's 15 questions. And I did it. I loved it. And I said, I am going to share this with everybody because, again, it's just a really cool way to look at those different 7 core muscles in your brain and how you can actually start programming things based on learning, how did you answer those questions? And I would say when you go through the assessment, try to answer like quickly, without thinking too much about it, because what happens is your non-conscious is going to be answering, and it's better that you let your non-conscious answer versus consciously answering, because when you consciously put too much thought on it, a lot of times we can talk ourselves into a different answer. And so I would say try to take the assessment with your non-conscious or your subconscious. And so just answer it quickly. Probably take you like 3 minutes to do this assessment. And then you can, it'll give you a score. And I would read through each part of those 7 core muscles and read what this assessment is saying about you. And then you can join NeuroGym if you would like. Like I said, I've been a member for many years, and I love it because it helps me to become a resilient realtor, become a very focused on what I want out of life. And it's given me confidence, it's given me clarity. And I know that if you have a situation where you feel like you're stuck, this is going to be the best thing for you. Okay, so I hope you enjoy this topic of looking at your brain and those 7 core muscles that you can work with. And I know that this was recorded, so you can go back and listen to it, learn at it after you do the assessment. But I really want you to have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you next time. All right, thank you.
If you'd like more information or to get connected to the Agent Power Huddle, join our free Facebook group. This call was designed for the agents in our EXP organization, but open to any agent from any brokerage. If you're a guest and you're interested in learning more about EXP or our specific resources within the Agent Collective, reach out to the person who invited you to this call to get more info. Produced by the Agent Collective Media Network.